Woo! Can you say hi? Everybody loves ya. You're gonna do the intro with Mama? Is it gonna be hard to do the intro because you're so cute? Is it gonna be hard because he's so cute? You guys loved Rue so much last time, so I decided I'd bring her to come say hello. Start this video off with all this adorableness. Hi guys, thank you guys so much for coming to hang out. Whether you're new here or a Wine Wednesday regular, I appreciate you stopping by. If you are new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me. This is Reverie. She does not stay for the entire video. She just wanted to come say hi. Okay, is it time to go see Papa? Say bye everybody. Say enjoy the episode. See you next time. Oh, sorry. Is this chain to The Rock circa 1992? We're gonna go with it today. I feel like this whole look is quite 90-ish, 80s. I feel like I used Soul Glow today.
Just let your soul glow.
And just let your soul glow. I know you didn't come here for that, but you are welcome. Before we get started, I need to give a huge thank you and send lots of love to our sponsor today, NordVPN. You guys already know all the reasons why I love my VPN, so today I thought it'd be really fun to give you 5 fun facts about a VPN and some of the things that it protects you from, because really there is so much more to it than just like watching Love Island UK with me. Alrighty, let's break it down for you. Let's start with VPN itself and what it stands for. VPN stands for a Virtual Private Network. Number 2, it protects you from your data being sold. I see it like your data is like a digital diary that someone can read through and sell. And some of the things that your data will be bought for are things like ads and targeting, surveillance and spying, identity theft, blackmail. Number 3, you'd really benefit from a VPN if you use public Wi-Fi often in places like coffee shops or on hotspots, because you're definitely at a higher risk of being hacked and having your identity stolen. Number 4, this one's wild but very interesting to think about. Sometimes having a VPN can literally mean saving somebody's life. So people who live in countries with limited freedom of speech or authoritarian regime, they can hide their location and communicate in private without worrying about, literally going to jail or losing their life. That's actually really heavy when you think about it, because so many of us watching right now can't even really process what that would be like. And number 5, if you do not have a VPN, you right now are being tracked by government agencies through things like your social media posts, your browsing history, your messages, and other private data. So a VPN will encrypt that data and allow you more privacy. If you guys want to get on the VPN train with me, you guys can go to nordvpn.com/Sherrilyn or use code Sherrilyn for a 2-year plan plus a bonus gift with a huge discount. Thank you as always, Nord. You know I love ya. All right, the story we're talking about today actually took place in the 90s, but it gained a lot of attention again after the movie Jennifer's Body came out. This is a cult classic starring Megan Fox. Side note, how is it that she's like coming back into the spotlight again and like looking better than she did 10 years ago? Like, holy bejesus, that girl is fine. Good for you, Megan. Usually I find like when I watch a movie that is inspired by true events, you've got so much extra added effects for like Hollywood. This case though, I felt like I was reading something that couldn't be true. The girl we're talking about today is a girl named Elise Pollard, and the real life accounts sound like a bone-chilling Hollywood script. The fact that this is real, it was so unfathomable to me while I was reading. Did I just say unfathomable right the first time? If you're new here, something you'll start to notice is I don't know how to talk. So like these are big wins for me. But seriously, when I was trying to think of a word to describe to you, to articulate how I felt, to just really bring out how fudged up some people are out there. Yeah, I couldn't even think of a word, and I just can't believe that there are literally humans like this that walk among us. So get settled in, lock your doors, and prepare not to trust anyone. I definitely need a sip of wine before we get started on this one. I'm having it in my friend's Christmas cup today. What's better than friends and Christmas mixed together? Nothing. Today, you guys, I'm drinking dandelion wine. I went to the farmer's market today for the first time this year. I love going to the farmer's market every Sunday with my family. And my favorite booth is obviously the wine one. you know, you just gotta support local. So you guys, this is from Spirit Hills Honey Winery. If you haven't tried a honey wine, oh my gosh, please do. And I've never tried a dandelion wine before, but I just recently learned like how wonderful dandelion is for you. So then when she told me that there was like 100 times more antioxidants in this dandelion wine than regular wine, I was like, okay, so like my body needs this, clearly. All right, I'm done. Today's case takes place in Arroyo Grande, California in the 1990s. I just said like 1990s, like it was like the 1900s, but lately that's kind of how I feel the 90s was. I'm at that age now where the 90s seems like a long time ago, and it's like really overwhelming to think sometimes because it was long ago. I read that in this area in the 90s. I'm not sure if it's still like this now, but back then, although you could find some of the best hiking trails there, the area itself was not the best. The crime rate there was higher than the national average, and if you were a resident, you were just really used to things like shootings and stabbings happening just on the regular. The statistic that I read for in 1995 when this took place, out of 14,000 residents, there was 100 violent crimes that year. And when you think about oftentimes in small populated cities or towns, there's always that sense of like nothing bad ever happens here. We don't lock our doors. It's always like the newcomers that come and like stir shit up and just mess that up for everybody. And it's like one violent crime. So when you think about 100 violent crimes in just 1 year, it's high. For David and Lisanne Pollard, there was obviously something that drew them to the area, and they moved there with their son and 3 daughters, Ryan, Jenny Lee, Christina, and Elise. Elise was the first born to David and Lisanne. She was born April 24th, 1980 in Templeton, California. She spent 9 years of her life in San Luis Obispo County until in 1989 when her family moved to the Arroyo Grande area. Elise's mom homeschooled her for 2 years before she started in middle school, and then she went to Arroyo Grande High School. Elise was a good student. She enjoyed going to school. She got good grades. She was also very active in soccer, tennis, and theater, on top of also being a member of her church choir and attending Bible study. She grew up very close to her family. Her mom was a stay-at-home mom, and it sounds like she was the mom that within that neighborhood all of the kids liked to be around. Probably wish their own moms had some of her traits too. Her dad was a construction worker who actually built the family home that they lived in, so I can imagine how special that would have been for all of them. Elise had a room that sounds like you would have dreamed of if you were a kid, especially a teen. It was big, spacious, and it had these French doors. And when you looked out, all you saw was like these beautiful hills. Ideal in the day when it's nice and bright out, but maybe not the best at nighttime when you feel like anything in those trees can see you, but you can't see them. There was also the added element sometimes of it being a little bit spookier because Elise's room was separated from her entire family. It was like on the opposite end of the house. So bonus when you wanted privacy, but there was probably those nights where she was just like, ooh, I'm just like all alone back here. One thing Elise loved doing was taking trips out to go and see her grandmother, who she was named after. She had a ranch in Santa Ynez. Suri says I'm right. She loved going there and just hopping on a horse and just riding for hours. Elise sounded like a very adventurous, free-spirited 15-year-old. She wanted to be an actress and singer when she got older, and it sounded like with her type of personality and confidence and just beauty inside and out, coupled with the determination and passion that she had for her goals, it is no doubt that she probably would have achieved them. She was fearless. One of her favorite things to do was to jump off of the roof of her house onto her trampoline. She was also the friend who was persuading her girlfriends to go on the highest, scariest roller coaster at amusement parks. She and her friends actually sounded a lot like my friends at this age. They'd go to McDonald's for coffees and like sneak a cigarette thinking they're super cool. She loved Beck. Remember the singer Beck? Shaggy little. I kind of got some Beck hair going on. No, it's definitely Soul Glow. But she had his pictures plastered all over her wall. She sounds a lot cooler than me. I had pictures plastered all over my wall too, but it was Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls. I mean, still, I'm like die-hard Backstreet Boy and Spice Girl fan. But, you know, if you were into that, like, alternative, more indie scene, you know, you just had, like, a different flair about you. Most of their weekends were spent at the movie theaters because there really wasn't much else to do. Sometimes they'd even just stay and watch a movie back to back if it was good, or if they just like really had nothing else to do. Elise was definitely the extrovert out of her group of best friends. She was the one who was always down to a party, loved meeting other people. Everyone described her as really fun, kind of rebellious, but like that innocent rebellion where she was known to, you know, sneak out here and there. Nothing we didn't all try. Her personality and looks pretty much had every guy in her grade wanting to date her, but her and her friends were into like the little bit of an older scene. They thought the kids in their class were fun, but not like on their level of maturity. Even though Elise had her social and adventurous side, her and her friends were pretty good at always sticking together. Her girlfriends were a little bit more cautious and had a higher guard, but they all did share the mutual thoughts of sticking together and not getting caught up in the wrong crowd. For the most part, Elise really didn't give her parents too much trouble, but in late 1994, she did start pushing the limits of rebellion by getting in the habit of sneaking out here and there, going to meet up with boys or going to a party. She was known to experiment with a little Mary Jane here and there. Sometimes she'd even sneak friends or boys into her room. That's a tough one, but I used to do that. Sometimes my parents would tell me that I could only have like 2 friends sleep over, and then when everyone would go to bed, we'd sneak in like 4 more in the window, and then in the morning they would just like pop out and go home. My mom watches every episode of my true crime videos, so this is probably the first time she's learning about this. Whoops. One group that never made it to the cut of coming in for like a sneak-in hangout was a group that Elise's friends and most of the other students stayed away from. They were known as being misfits. The group of 3 was made up of Jacob Delaschmidt, who was 15 years old, a boy named Joe Fiorella, who was 14, and Royce Casey, who was 16 years old. They were all known around town for all the wrong reasons. Joe and Jacob went to the same high school as Elise, and Royce was at a continuation school after he was kicked out of his high school. But out of that group of guys, people did say that he seemed to be the most level-headed out of them. While Elise and her friends were doing things like going to the movies to keep entertained or, you know, going to local parties, these guys kept themselves entertained by doing things like sniffing glue or getting high on speed. I've never tried either, but it just sounds like just super intense. It just kind of brings me to like the movie Spun. Like that's where I go when I think of like sniffing glue and speed together. In high school, the 3 of them, along with another friend of theirs who had this like very tough guy reputation, they decided they wanted to start their own heavy metal rock band. They named it Hatred, and it was in the genre of like death metal. Their idols were definitely bands like Slayer, but people who had heard them play said that the music sounded just way too loud even for like being a death metal band. They'd have like loud like zings on the guitar that just didn't make sense, overpowering drum beats so you couldn't really like hear anything. Like it was just like a big cluster F. And I guess any of the words that you could make out, it was just always strongly focused on things like the devil, Satanism, and sacrificing virgins. Joe played the drums. His fave move was just like smashing his stick downs like a maniac with no real plan. I think Joe in his mind thought he was like the lady killer of the group. He was known to get fixated on girls and then follow them around town. But girls who he did this to weren't like very like welcoming to it. I guess it was quite creepy and eerie, mostly because he was described as like a cold, silent type. I guess he was also extremely dirty. He wore really baggy, grungy clothes, had long, greasy hair, which is fine, but like it was just never clean. Like it was just filthy and just stinky. He went to the same school as Elise. I guess he had been kicked out at one point prior, but then he was allowed back in. Royce Casey was the quiet guy of the group. He was also the one who looked more put together, I guess, than the others, and maybe that approachability made him more experienced with dating girls here and there, unlike his friends. So while Joe thought he was like the ladies' man, it was more Royce in this group. Jacob Delaschmidt was more talkative and outgoing. He had long hair too, but he kept it in a neatly cut ponytail. He also liked the grunge look, but he kept it like the clean grunge. I guess the girls found him a little less creepier than Joe, but they also kept their distance from him. He was very artistic and he liked to draw things mainly like monsters and death scenes. I think it's fair to say he was also the black sheep of his family. His parents were devout Mormons. His one brother was a missionary and the other one was a teacher. On top of his music taste that his family couldn't really relate to, he also had an issue with drug use. So to try to get him to stop, his family enrolled him in Mariposa Community Recovery Center. And this would be a fateful decision because another family also enrolled a child there, and that was the Pollards. Elise was also sent to the clinic after her parents found a stash of grass in her room. Elise didn't put up any argument in going. She agreed that it was probably the best decision for her. She just didn't sound like that type of teenager that was going to give her parents a really hard time and throw this like catastrophic meltdown, kind of like I used to do when I was that age. Sorry, Mom. Elise knew of Jacob at school. They were actually in the same art class together, but they were never friends. She didn't really talk to him because there wasn't like any common interest, and she did think that it was a little bit alarming that all of his drawings were mostly of the devil in class. His drug problems and just rebellious streak was far more serious than Elise's. He was taking a lot of amphetamines, and his parents were getting called weekly from the school because he would just miss every class. He and Elise didn't become friends or anything like that in these counseling sessions, but apparently Jacob couldn't help but start noticing Elise all of a sudden. He would bring her up to his friends more and more, which was dangerous because this was a time where the boys were wanting to pour everything they had into making their band a success, and one of these things was committing a horrifying act on another individual. This is 1994, so this is the day where the internet and chatting in things like forums is so new, and I mean, not even a lot of people knew how to do it, and really exciting. The days of dial-up. It's really the first time people were able to connect and talk to people around the world. And by making these connections, you found people who had the same interests in you, and you were no longer like the only people in your town who were like you and seen as an outcast. The internet also gave access to a plethora of information out there. So for these guys in particular, it was an abundance of things like material on Satan or rituals and spells. I guess they signed up to a site that would send them books every month. I think it was like maybe one of like an OG, a subscription club for like the Satan crew, but it sent books to teach them all the things they wanted to know. And it also sent their customers a collection of knives that was said to make any ritual a diabolical event. In their mind, having a weapon like this was crucial for them because the more they were reading, the more they started believing that performing a ritual by sacrificing a human life was the only way that they were going to make their band a success. With Jacob being in Elise's presence, not only at school, but now in this program for counseling, he can't think of anybody but her that would be perfect for this sacrifice. He's just talking more and more about her, and it starts to turn into this obsession that even his friends take on also because it's all they're hearing. And this was something that Elise started to take notice of. On several occasions, she brought up to her friends that she felt like they were staring at her too much. One day she said she noticed Joe across the street of her house and he's just staring at her home. I guess initially she didn't think too much of it. She kind of wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt and not just be like, oh, he's stalking me. But after it happened more often, she was like, what the shit is going on? I guess she wasn't scared of him or anything. She just thought he was crushing on her and thought, stalking, weird flex, but okay. And just the type of person she was, she thought maybe if she was friendlier to him or, gave him a smile, said hi, it would make him less awkward and creepy. She was just that person who was outgoing and friendly, and she didn't see the bad in people. She was just trying to find solutions of how to bring them out of their shell. Her friends did have weird vibes though. They on numerous occasions told Elise to just be careful, to stay away from them. They told her things like, we've got enough friends. We don't need to get caught up in their reputation or eeriness. For the most part, she listened in terms of not going out of her way to make conversation with them or anything like that. But if she ran into them, she would say hi and would have like a short conversation with them. In the boys' viewpoint, they're building up, I guess, like a trust in Elise. They're seeing Elise's willingness and openness to engage with them as a benefit for them to lure her in the future to carry out their plans. The plan was to take Elise's life and sacrifice her, and in doing this, the devil would reward them by making their heavy metal band a success beyond their imagination. To them, Elise ticked all the boxes that they needed. She was outgoing, she was kind, she was beautiful, and she was a virgin. And then one day in May 1995, they tried to carry out their plan. What happened was Elise was walking home from school, and when she turned the corner onto her street that afternoon, she notices a group of boys, and they're shouting and they're waving their hands trying to get her attention. As she gets closer, she hears Jacob yelling, "Help, quick, come here." Elise's initial reaction is just puzzled why they're like screaming at her and what the heck is going on. As she's making her way closer to them, they're pointing down like this embankment, and they say to her, "We've got a problem, can you help? There's a guy stuck down there and he's broken his leg." As she gets to the side of this bank, she sees it's not just Jacob that's trying to get her attention and help this person that's down there. She finds herself surrounded by the group of boys. She kind of steps back and sees this hair-raising glint in their eyes, and they were all silent and just like smiling weirdly at her. All of a sudden, a hand pushes her. She loses her balance, and all of a sudden she rolls down this bank. When she stops rolling, she hears her mom say, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And all of a sudden the boys book it. Elise dusts herself off and scrambles back up the side of this hill, and her mom's like, "Are you okay?" And Elise isn't even sorted yet, so she's just like, "Yeah, I'm fine." As the night goes on, she's able to then kind of sit back and process what happened. She's like, is this just me, or did they call me over, tell me someone was hurt, push me down this bank, and then it turns out like no one was down there at all? It made her really uncomfortable, so she decided to tell her parents that she thought maybe they were stalking her and that one of them liked her a little bit too much. But in the same breath, she said that she didn't want to make a big deal about it and insisted that it wasn't serious. It was just something she kind of wanted to get off her chest. She kind of just saw it as it was just stupid, they're messed up kids, but that they weren't going to do anything serious to her. So her perception on them was enough to convince her parents that it probably wasn't anything too serious then. When she told her friends, though, they were like, "Oh, heck no, you need to definitely stay away from them now." But for some reason, they got the feeling that in some ways, even though Elise was a little bit freaked out by them, she was also very curious about them because they were so different than anybody that she knew in that small area. The next time she sees them is on July 21st, 1995, when she's at a party and they all show up. At the party, Elise started talking to Jacob, and she decides that he's not that bad after all once you have the time to sit down and figure them out. She even says to him by the end of the night, my friends say that you guys are bad news and just to stay away from you. And he just kind of laughs it off and says, "Yeah, I get it, just by the appearance, but we're good guys." At the end of the night, Jacob tells Elise that he's getting some wicked pot soon, and he wants to know if he can have her phone number to let her know when it comes in so that she can smoke it with them. Since they had gotten along all night and she didn't see any red flags or anything like that, she thought, yeah, sure, and she gave it to him. The next night, Jacob calls Elise. He told her they had some marijuana and LSD, and she agrees to meet up with them at the end of the street. At this time, she was sitting with her parents watching TV, so when she hangs up the phone, she just kind of hangs out for a couple more minutes, and then she tells them she's gonna go to bed. Wine break. I feel that dandelion antioxidizing already. Remember, she's on the other side of the house, so she goes to her room. She puts some pillows underneath her blanket to make it look like she's sleeping, and she's able to sneak out of her French doors, and nobody notices that she left. Unlike other times where she had snuck out and planned on making an evening of it or going to a party, it didn't seem like this was her plan this evening. She actually only left with a sweater, sweatpants, and not even any shoes. She just wanted to make it a really quick pass little doobski, and then I'm just gonna get on my way. When she meets up with the boys, though, they decide to walk to this area called Camsell Lane, and it's about less than a mile away from Elise's house, and it has this eucalyptus grove there. bar. When they get there, they sit down on this bench and they just start talking and smoking. And when Elise becomes giggly and less on her guard, Jacob walks behind her, removes his belt, and puts it around her throat to try and stop her from screaming. Without hesitation, Joe takes out the knife that they received from their online book club and stabs her, and he only stops when he goes to pass the knife to let the other guys do the same. In cases like this, you just pray that at least the victim doesn't suffer. But sadly, she was alive and aware long enough to pray out to God and call for her mom for help. When the boys were done and they thought she had passed, they tried to hide her under a tree and they left. Sadly, though, she was still alive and she died alone and from blood loss. Most likely around the time that this is happening to her, her father walks in her bedroom to say goodnight to her, and he notices that she's trying to pull the old pillow under the comforter and she wasn't in bed. He leaves to go see if she's anywhere in the neighborhood. He's looking in all the neighbors' yards. He looks in the alley, in the fields, and there's no sign of her. He then goes, we can do this. He then goes driving around the surrounding area and nothing. This is the time where they didn't have call display or the ability to easily track who she last spoke to. So they don't even know who to reach out to see if they're with Elise. He starts by calling her best friend and she is half asleep. She says she doesn't know where she is. And she's kind of vague too with ideas of maybe, what happened. Because she feels like Elise has just snuck out again and she's going to see her in the morning and hear all about it. And she doesn't want to give up information to her parents that's going to get Elise in trouble. Even the police felt, not too concerned when they called to report her missing. They just figured she was a teenager, having some issues, maybe had a fight with their parents that they didn't want to disclose, and that she'd show up in a few hours or maybe at max a couple days. Then, within 48 hours of her disappearance, the police receive an unconfirmed report that Elise had been seen with a man in Pismo Beach. Pismo Beach? Sounds adorable. I guess this was about 10 miles outside of Rio. This caller was actually a classmate of Elise's, so he said he knew her and he was positive it was her, and it looked like she had cut her hair and that she was living with this guy out there who was older than her and appeared to be in his early 20s. Without any follow-up whatsoever, trying to locate this guy or Elise, the police just call Elise's parents and pass on the information, and they're just she's good. Based on the relationship Elise had with her parents, they're no, this isn't right. We would at least hear if she had an older friend. They had a very open relationship with her. I can imagine it would be so frustrating to try to tell somebody like the police, that your daughter better than they are assuming they do. I would be furious if somebody was, I guess in a way, undermining me and just being oh no, I've seen this before. I know this is how it's going to turn out. And I know that in a lot of cases it is, but I feel like there are definitely exceptions to the rules. And in this case, there was. The Pollards felt they knew their daughter very well. She did have an innocent, rebellious side to her, but they also knew that she deeply loved them and would never ever want to hurt them or make them worry. They decide to go back to the police and give it another shot, and this time they tell them about the incident that Elise had with this group of guys from her school when she was pushed down the bank a few weeks earlier. The Pollards left thinking that the police were going to interview these guys, but it turns out none of them were interviewed. By not interviewing them or showing them that anybody had any suspicion of them, it allowed Joseph, Jacob, and Royce to continue going back to the scene where they left Elise, and while there, they would just stare at her and allegedly also engage in sickening acts. Wherever your mind just went, it's probably right. Disgusting. As time goes on, their lips start to get a little looser, and they start telling people that they had committed the ultimate sin to God and that they bought their ticket to hell. Since the family wasn't getting anywhere with the police, they decide to hire their own private investigator. This guy's able to follow up on a few leads that they have, nothing major, but he prints thousands of missing person flyers, which starts to chip away at Royce's conscience because he's constantly seeing Elise's photo around town. In the meantime, the next person who goes to the police is Elise's best friend because she says she keeps having night terrors. She kept thinking back to the three boys and the story that Elise told her about being thrown down the hill by them as well. She contacts the police, she tells them the story, gives them the names of the 3 involved. But sadly, this is another case where there's missed opportunities and somebody who dropped the ball. I guess the deputy who had spoken to her best friend didn't share this information with any of the officers in the police force, so he didn't even know that Elise's parents had already come on a separate occasion, told the same story, named the same boys, and then this guy too also decides not to interview them either. So they're just left to carry on, walk the streets, go to school. I guess Elise's friends were still uneasy about them, but in their mind, they expected that with the information that they had given the police, they did their job and interviewed them, so they figured maybe they were wrong and these guys didn't have anything to do with it because they're still at school, so they must have just, been taken off the list. While I was reading about this case, I felt so bad for her best friends because this is like high school, and as they're going to school, rumors start swirling about Elise. A lot of them start by saying, that she was a runaway, that she ran off with an older guy and she was a floozy and she was using drugs. So, they're left to defend their friend and hear this information, but also don't have the answers of where she is. And then they start hearing that Elise was sacrificed by the boys, but no one who had that information felt comfortable enough to go to the police. Partly because they didn't want to be like a snitch, and then another element of it was that they could be wrong, and then if these guys found out that they said something, there would be consequences for, going to the police with something like this. And that's another thing that would probably just be so frustrating because you are left just wanting answers and to know where your friend is. Regardless if they're no longer here, you want to bring them back home and have that closure. And months are going by and nothing. Christmas comes and goes. Her family still is holding out hope that there's this small chance they're going to find her alive, but deep down they just have this sinking feeling that they're probably not, but they want to bring her home. As the days are going on, Royce Casey is falling more and more apart. He hasn't been able to eat or sleep since everything happened. He thinks one way to make himself feel better is by befriending Elise's friends. I guess they talked about many things as well as Elise, and her best friend said that there was a point where she actually felt like he was very genuine and he did seem truly sad that she was missing. So she gave him the benefit of the doubt and decided not to group him with like his other friends that were definitely creepy to her. She said she got the impression that he was also trying to just distance himself from them, and he would say things to her like they were getting too into dark stuff. In October of that year, 1995, he had joined a ministry group, and by the new year he starts telling the minister that he had done some really bad stuff, and he was asking about things like redemption, but anytime the minister tried to push him further to talk about it, he would just stop. His minister said this went on for several months, and then on March 13th, 1996, which was about 8 months after Elise had died, he decides to go to the police. When he first gets there, it seems like he was kind of having an internal battle where he wanted to give up some information and then he was scared and he would pull back. But after a few hours, he ends up giving them a full confession. He admits to the police that not only had he and his friends killed Elise, but they had sat around and planned it for over a month, and that their motive was to sacrifice her for the devil. After he's done his confession, he agrees to take the police to Elise's body. Once they find her that same day, they go and arrest Joe and Jacob. And again, I can't help but think of how frustrating this time would have been for Elise's parents and her best friends, because once people at the school or acquaintances of them find out that they've been arrested, then all of a sudden everybody that was quiet, you can't shut them up. They're like, oh yeah, we knew this was gonna happen. They kept talking to us about finding a virgin because they wanted to sacrifice someone. And it just makes you wonder that if just like even one person had said something, maybe it would have been enough to alarm these guys that, teachers or counselors or police or parents were onto them and just like steer them away from wanting to do this. The trial was heavily focused on their idolizing bands like Slayer. They believed that they would be rewarded by killing Elise with the abilities to play their instruments harder and faster, bash their heads like Wilder, and that they were going to be a success. Royce's lawyer was hoping for some leniency because he had come forward and he had now these new religious beliefs. He said he also came forward because he wanted to save other victims. He truly felt like Elise was just going to be the first of many. In the end, though, all 3 of them pleaded no contest, and they were sentenced to 25 years to life. After the trial, Elise's parents also filed a lawsuit against the band Slayer. They claimed their music was responsible for their daughter's murder. Part of their argument was that their songs gave instructions to killers to torture, murder, and rape. A judge threw the case out, though, and said there wasn't any legal position that could be taken that would make Slayer responsible for Elise's death. Years into their prison sentence, Jacob decided to do an interview and made a statement that said the whole satanic ritual thing wasn't actually the real motive. He said that Elise was murdered because Joe was obsessed with her and became obsessed with killing her. To me, I don't know, it sounds like some setup for like a chance at an appeal and just like passing the buck to somebody else, being like, you know, like, oh, his obsession spilled onto me, and I don't buy it. I think they were all set on killing her, all knew what they were gonna do, and had their own like sick reasons for it. Yeah, this one is just, I can't even imagine how terrified she was. That's what I kept going back to. So sweet, so trusting, so bubbly. And for something like that to happen to her, and then just like not one of them snap out of it and just like stop and try to save her, it just makes you sick. And her poor parents, this is why like we're all crazy, overprotective, and also why a lot of parents who are in these situations probably don't want to share a lot of information about, you know, their teenagers' past history, especially with like rebellion. The minute you say, you know, my child has snuck out in the past before, they're like, oh yeah, like missing teen. They turn into these brick walls, completely closed off. I mean, teenagers, like, they have their moments. We all did. But to just group emotions and innocent, like, rebellion actions, you know, like just testing the waters for that long of time, especially when people are coming forward and giving names and stories of, like, questionable behavior, and you just, like, keep going on. It's been, like, over 8 months, and nobody looked into these guys. It wasn't until one of them came forward. Freaking bullshit, man. I personally don't think like Slayer is to blame. I feel like the trio definitely fed off of each other. And then when you add in them being exposed to, you know, the internet and going on these forums and finding out people were like them and being encouraged to do like even darker things that, you know, they could have maybe not even come up with on their own, like that was the recipe for disaster. And I mean, I guess maybe like that there's like a sprinkle element of music also being involved, but in that aspect I think it would have been more of them wanting to be like on that caliber, and they really felt like if they sacrificed somebody they would have that success. I don't know, this case is just That's it for me today, you guys. Thank you again to NordVPN. Don't forget to go to nordvpn.com/Sherrilyn or use my code Sherrilyn. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. I love and I appreciate you so, so much. I love that you guys are setting the goal of 100K by the end of the year for me. It is a goal that I have for myself. So just to like have you guys like on board and encouraging me and just like rooting for me to get there, like, I appreciate you so much. I'll see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon.